Hello everyone, I'm Sarah Holderness, and this is Practical Python for Beginners. And in this module, we're going to look at Python functions. We've already used quite a few functions so far, and we can think of them like mini programs that complete a specific task. And we might not know how some of them work, but they give us the expected results. Some of the functions we've put to use are print, which takes in one string or multiple strings and prints them to the console. Input prompts the user for input and returns the string they entered. Int converts the given number to an integer and returns it. And randint takes a low and high bound and returns a random integer within that range. As we can see, we can define a function to do pretty much anything we want, and once we do, we can use it over and over again. Now let's define our own function. We want a simple function that prints a greeting for a given name. Defining a function starts with the def keyword, then the function name, and then you can add any parameters, or these are values, that you need to pass into the function. Then the function body is indented below the definition. Let's put our function to use in a program. At the top of the greetings.py file, we have our function defined. Then below it, we have our main program, which is where the program starts running. It starts by asking the user to input their name, and then the greeting function is called. And note that the greeting function doesn't get run until it's called. Order matters in your program. The functions need to be defined first at the top of your file before they can be called in your main program, just like you need to define a variable before you can use it. Let's look at the order in which our program is run. First, after running our program, it starts with the first line of code that isn't in a function definition, and then it knows that's the main program. After that first line is run, enter your name is printed to the screen, and then the user enters Sarah, which is saved to the input name variable. Then we go to the next line of the main program, which is a call to the greeting function, and the value of input name is passed in. Since we called a function, we now go to that function. Now the name parameter is assigned the passed in value of input name, which was Sarah. Then we go to the first line of the function, which prints hello and the name variable, so we see hello Sarah printed to the screen. Now, since the function is finished, Python runs the next line in the main program, which happens to be the end of the program, so it finishes executing. Just like order matters in your program, so does scope. A variable created inside a function can only be used inside that function. This is called local scope, which means in our greeting program, the variable name only exists inside the function where it was defined. So if we tried to use the variable name in the main body of our program by printing thanks name, we would get an error that name is undefined. If a variable is created in the main body of the program, it is a global variable and has global scope. That means it can be used anywhere. Here, let's rewrite the main program with the variable name defined on the first line, which means the variable name is global. Then we changed our greeting function not to have a parameter. Instead, it just references the global variable name. Now, if we run this new program, it runs the same as before. It would ask you for your name. It would save the name Sarah to the name variable. Then the greeting function would be called, and hello Sarah would be printed, and then finally the program would end. But using global variables can become messy. The name variable is still global and used in the greeting function, but what if we want to ask the user for another name and save it to the name2 variable? Now how do we use the greeting function to print name2? We can't pass it in because greeting doesn't take parameters anymore. So the only way would be to save name2 to the name variable and then call greeting. But then the original value saved to the name variable is gone. Let's try this example again with local scope. Here we change the greeting function back to the way it was to take in a name parameter, and then print it instead of printing a global variable. And again, we have two different names in our main program, name1 and name2, and we can call the greeting function to print them both separately. If we run this, we can see it asks for a name and prints hello Sarah, and then it asks for another name and prints hello Bob. So now things are a little easier to follow since local scope allows us to reuse the greeting function with different values. You may be wondering why we would bother creating functions, and there are two main reasons. One is you want to reuse a chunk of code over and over. We just showed how to reuse the greeting function for two different names. The greeting function may not be a great example because it simply calls the print function, but for longer functions, not having to copy and paste code over and over and simply call one function is much better. The second reason to create a function is to organize your code by logical units, which we'll look at next. Let's look at another example function that returns a value. We want a simple function that adds two numbers and returns the result. Again, we have the def keyword, the function name addition, and the two parameters a and b that we want to add. Then the function returns the number result of a plus b. The return keyword is used to return a value or even a sequence of values from a function. Now if we look at using this function in a program, we first define our addition function, and then the main program starts by prompting the user for two values. Then we call our addition function with the two values, and the result is returned and saved to the result variable. Finally, we print the result to the screen. Let's run this and see what the flow of the program looks like again. First, the user is asked to enter the first number, which is saved to the num1 variable. Then the user is asked to enter the second number, which is saved to the num2 variable. Then the addition function is called with num1 and num2. When we enter the addition function, the value of num1 is copied to a and num2 is copied to b. Then the result of a plus b is returned. Back in the main program, the addition result is saved to the result variable. Finally, the result is 62 is printed to the screen, and then the program ends. As we said before, we can use functions to organize our code, and we can move the whole main body of code to its own function. Now all of the program code is contained inside this main function. But remember, we still need to call the main function after the functions are declared. And if we ran this, we would see the output is the same as before. The code is just organized into functions. Now let's take what we've learned and look at two demos. First, where we'll create a function in order to reuse code in a dice rolling game. And second, we'll refactor our weather program to organize it into functions.